Patrick Sheehan here. I am a customer engineer with Google. I will be hosting the session today. I wanted to cover some logistics real quick before we get started. First and foremost, if you have a question, please post it in chat. If you need to come off mute to answer or to ask a question, feel free to do so, but hold off until your answer may be answered or your question may be answered via chat. If the speaker does open it up for Q&A, feel free to unmute then. If you're dialed in, use *6 to unmute. We will be recording the session today and making the session available publicly. This includes the Q&A portion. And with that, I would like to welcome you to our Modernizing Hadoop Workloads with Google and Hashmap session. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Scott Fitzharris.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. First off, thanks everyone for joining. Let me go ahead and get rolling already. So appreciate everyone taking the time today to join us. We've got an hour on the calendar. We'll see if we actually use all of that time. We may give everyone a few moments back. From an agenda perspective, I'm not going to speak directly to it, but you can kind of see overall what the agenda looks like. So we're going to kind of talk through what does a data lake look like? What do data lakes look like on GCP specifically? Some common use cases, and then, all right, this all sounds really good. How would I think about moving forward? I guess by way of introduction, again, as Patrick mentioned, my name is Scott Fitzharris. I am with Google Cloud in the Houston market. I've been with Google coming up on 3 years. One of the reasons that I'm actually doing this presentation also is that I'm kind of uniquely qualified, that I spent about 4 years prior to Google with one of the major Hadoop providers. I was with Hortonworks for about 4 years, so I understand that the space fairly well from a data lake perspective. Acknowledged I did move from Hortonworks to Google Cloud. In all honesty, the presentation and kind of the reasoning we're walking through today was one of the reasons that I ended up choosing to come over to Google, among other reasons. But that's a little bit of background on myself. I do have one other speaker with me today. He's going to talk later on. Kelly Kaleffel is actually going to talk about the sounds great, how do I move forward portion. When Kelly goes, he'll go ahead and do a little bit of introduction on himself, and then we'll have some Q&A. Feel free, as if you have questions, as Patrick mentioned, put questions into the chat. If they are addressed a little bit further on, I'll probably hold off on those, but otherwise I'll try and answer those as they come through. So without further ado, obviously I've done a bit of a welcome. So background, on Google and Google Cloud. This says big data is in our DNA. Personally, I would say big data is our DNA. Google specifically, as a broad company, we have 9 products with greater than 1 billion users. Since its inception, Google has always had to manage what we would call big data. Google obviously doesn't even really consider big data. We just manage data. It's what we do as an organization. We have, over the course of history, built numerous tools. I'm not going to go through all the history of all of those, but you can go research. Thank you. You can go research some of the background there on the tools and platforms that we've built. Basically at its core, Google, discerned, hey, these tools and platforms are phenomenal, and the Hadoop industry kind of came from most of those. But what Google has really turned the corner on is they're not necessarily really all that easy to manage and easy to, really easy to use, but kind of keeping those up operationally, that's where Google Cloud and really the cloud comes into this. And beyond that, on the cloud side, as I mentioned, Google Cloud, we feel is driving convergence, to really empower business and business, folks to leverage all of this quote unquote big data. From a convergence perspective, we are absolutely seeing a convergence. Data lakes used to be kind of a standalone thing. Data warehouses used to be something different. Absolutely seeing convergence in that space. Same time with real-time data, streaming data, batch processing. We're absolutely seeing convergence there. And then finally, and I think most importantly, and this is where Google feels is our strength, analytics, AI, and ML on all of that data. And wouldn't you love to have analytics, AI, and ML in real time as data is being ingested? I think those are, from a big perspective, the technology trends that we're seeing that are really driving a lot of change and why companies are moving to cloud, Google Cloud specifically. So why are we here today? There's no doubt about it that the data lake concept and the Hadoop concept is a very, very strong, concept for everyone. Data is at the center of everything nowadays. You really and truly cannot do artificial intelligence, machine learning without data. If you do, it's just old-fashioned programming. Everything really kind of comes back to that convergence of data. Businesses nowadays are exactly this. It's built on and succeed on the power of observation. I think we're seeing it right now more than ever before. People have to use data to figure out what's happening in the business, what's happening in the markets. This is, I've been in business for 25 years. This is obviously probably one of the most non-normal events any of us have ever been through. And only if you have all of this data at your fingertips, do you have the ability to actually steer your company through transitions like this. And again, this comes back to, I would tell you, I think we used to preach and still do preach about the concepts of data lakes. Data lakes are not going away. We firmly believe there is a significant benefit to having data lakes. I think what we're beginning to see is the migration of those companies moving from on-prem Hadoop to cloud-based services. And the ROI challenge is probably one of the biggest reasons that we see this is, the concepts behind data lakes, what we has the ability to deliver is phenomenal. I think what we've just seen is that the ROI, because of some of the high cost challenges around, even though it is, commodity hardware, there's still a pretty high threshold from a cost perspective around that. And that's exactly why we feel as though, and I think we're seeing customers, this is not just Google seeing it, customers are migrating to Google Cloud, from on-prem data lakes as those commodity hardwares kind of come out of their refresh cycles and need to be updated. I think that's an interesting tipping point that we're beginning to see right now. From an ROI perspective, we absolutely know all of these cases that, most of the data is not being used. We have too much data, not enough of the data is being used. We've all seen these go back. We're storing more and more data, but actually using all of that data is becoming more of a challenge, and less of it is actually being used to make decisions. So what is, by definition, a data lake? This kind of speaks back to a little bit of, some tenure from a data and analytics perspective. Personally, if I go back to Oracle days. I wasn't an employee at Oracle, but I did big data warehouses, back in the 90s, as this shows at Oracle. Then we see the progression all the way through the big data vendors, now to the cloud vendors. And then we're even beginning to see specialized cloud vendors as well. So lots of change kind of going through. Concept of what is a data lake. The intent here is it really is intended to be a scalable and secure data platform, allowing for the ingestion of data, whether that be real-time, streaming, and batch, storing that data, processing that data, and then most importantly, being able to analyze that data. What a data lake is not. It's not just storing data, and it's not just a data warehouse. And I say just a data warehouse, meaning no offense to the data warehouses of the world. The concept of a data lake is broader than really just a traditional row table data warehouse. One of the most important concepts of a data lake is being able to manage, semi-structured, unstructured, as well as structured data, in addition to that. So as I just mentioned, so in our opinion, we're not trying to replace data warehouses. Data lakes are intended to be complementary, to those data warehouses. From a flow perspective, I think it, we have seen customers, I have personally seen customers go as far back as even using, emails, using videos, PDFs, all of the above from a, data perspective, incorporating metadata from that and bringing that into what we would kind of call a data lake, then bringing that into a data warehouse. And then most importantly, allowing, whether it's traditional data scientists or, kind of deeper data analysts, be able to really get a good view and visibility across all of those types of data, whether it's completely unstructured in an email, in an image, in a video, whatever that may be. How do you tie that with structured data? And I think great examples can lie in, if you're a manufacturing company, being able to pull in third-party data, Twitter data, customer sentiment data, customer support data. There's a lot of chat bots in the world now. Being able to pull all that together along with your structured data, with your sales and analytics type of data, those are the kinds of applications that we're really beginning to see now. Being delivered out of, customer sentiment analysis, customer 360, all of those types of things, being able to analyze that through the far right-hand side applications. So what per se is a data lake? I think I've talked about this a little bit. You've got data ingestion mechanisms. There's more, I'll acknowledge, there's more than just batch and stream, but to keep it at a simplistic level, you've got batch data you may bring in on a nightly basis or some hourly basis. You also have streaming data. So machine data, sensor data, all of the above, customer sentiment analysis data. Those can all be streams of data. We have to process that data. We may need to do some pre-processing, or we may just directly store that data. So I've got my data ingestion, I've got data processing, I've got storing, and then I might have another layer of data processing to actually get it into consumable formats and consumable capacities. And I think that's probably one of the trickiest parts about this, is being able to get it into that form that can then be consumed by a variety of mechanisms. Some consumption layers might be ML and AI. Other consumptions might simply be dashboards. Other consumption mechanisms might be Jupyter notebooks or any other variety. And then, of course, and this is probably one of the most important parts of all of the above, is no data lake can be successful, in my opinion, without very strong data management, data discovery, search, access, and security. This kind of comes back to and I'll go back and say, this is to me the greatness of Google. I was going to use an example of a, kind of the old school Library of Congress. You can only get usefulness out of the books that are in the Library of Congress if you can find them. Google has taken that obviously to the next level, but it goes back to anyone's data lake. A corporate data lake is the exact same way. You might be, as an organization, be doing a great job ingesting and storing and streaming and doing all that data. But if people can't find it, if they can't do some self-discovery on that data, if they can't do data management, data wrangling, and data engineering, then what use is it in reality? And I think that's some of those challenges that we have actually seen with the traditional data lakes. So what does a data lake look like on Google Cloud? By the way, I'm going to go ahead and preface, this session is really intended to be a 101. We're not going deep and into any specific area from a technology perspective. At the end of the day, I am a salesperson, so I'm presenting at a salesperson level. We as a organization would be very happy to go deeper and talk about any specific one of these products. But really, we're talking at a very high level: data ingestion, data storage. And I'm going to touch on obviously a couple of products specifically. You've got, Cloud Data Flow. You've got Cloud Data Fusion, PubSub. We also have Cloud Data Prep, which is a great. And Cloud Data Prep to me kind of spans across a couple of these. Cloud Data Storage is another one. So I've got just traditional object storage. I do also have BigQuery for me able to store structured data, all the way up to Looker, which is allowing for, we call it business intelligence, but really to me, Looker is the next evolution of data analytics. I've got data science, so our cloud AI platform. And then again, I've got data engineering as an application, but it's also a part of the overall mechanism for data ingestion. Cloud Data Fusion, Cloud Data Prep, and then of course, all of our partner applications. We've got hundreds of partner applications in the data and analytics space. And of course, all of this is secured and governed as everything within Google and Google Cloud is. So a little bit, and I'll come back. I have another slide that shows a little bit more detail, but hey, why do we get into why would we go with Google? What's the value of doing a cloud-based solution for a data lake? We've got studies that are publicly available driving a lower total cost of ownership. To me, if there's one factor that's probably stands out more than others, it really is and truly a lower total cost of ownership. And why is that? It's actually because a lot of these other pieces. It's because of easy management. I can spin up a cloud data prop cluster in 90 seconds. And I can, more importantly, spin that back down. And I think that's one of the most important drivers of that lower TCO. It's not a platform that has to continuously keep on running. Go back to AI and ML readiness. We don't have to necessarily install lots of other plugins and other items. This is all right here available at fingertips. I've got Dataproc Hub for scalable ML. We've got many other ML solutions that can play directly off of the data in your data lake. We have a direct example from a fast analytics perspective where one of our largest customers, Pandora, reduced query times from hours to minutes. And I've heard even greater than that. But that's the elastic scale of Google and a cloud-based framework that you have the ability to scale greater than what you have today in any sort of on-prem, or you've built it for such a large scale, your TCO is now kind of out of alignment. So I think that the fast analytics and the lower TCO, those two combined, are really two factors that play together quite a bit. And then lastly, security and governance. This is an area that Google specializes in. On top of that, we also have a lot of partners. Calibra is a great example of a partner where we're partnered in the data lake space for privacy policies and enforcement of those security policies as well. This is we've talked about this one a little bit already. These studies are publicly available. 57% lower TCO versus an on-prem, and even 30% lower than our competitor on EMR. And I think that the biggest reason is simply the quote down here. As you have the ability to move to ephemeral, and whether it be an ephemeral Hadoop cluster, same time from an ephemeral, if you're doing things with BigQuery, you're within the cloud space, you're only being charged, within the Google Cloud space, you're only being charged for what you use. you're not paying for cycles that are just spinning, or even if you have 0 cycles that are spinning, you're not paying for that. You spin for compute. You pay for compute as you use it, and I think that's where we see this very large 75% number down here by simply being able to spin up, spin down in such very short time frames. At a broad level, we kind of introduce this concept. What is a data lake? Overall, a data lake is a portion of Google's overall smart analytics platform. I'm not going to try and go through every one of these squares. These squares unto themselves could take an hour for each one of them. But again, it follows the same paradigm, the same pattern that we see. I have the ability to collect all of this data, whether it's in batch or streaming. I have the ability to process that data in both real time as well as batch, store that data, analyze that data, and then most importantly, understand what is this data telling me. Of course, I have the ability to compose through workflow orchestration across the entirety of that. And then at the very top, I have the ability to manage, discover, search across all of this for all of my data assets that I have within my data universe. I'm gonna build this one out. Sorry, get trapped into the build world. So why do customers build data lakes? I think I've spoken to quite a bit about this already. From a data ingestion perspective, all of the platforms, all of the tools and services are available, just as a service. We've got the strongest security in our perspective in the world. I'm not going to get into the why Google is the strongest in security. There's a lot of documentation that people can go read on that already. But I've got security. When you start looking at the processing, analyzing, and innovating, again, that comes back to Google in this space of ML and AI. It's outside of being known for Google. That's the next place where, in my opinion, we're known for is our advancements in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then lastly, being able to actually access all that data, find all of that data, catalog and search. Really, no one does better, in my opinion, and I think broadly our opinion, than Google from the ability to search and find all of that data, all by maintaining all of that data in a cloud storage, very, very low cost, very, very scalable. You have the ability to actually get, I'm going to say it's up to 9 nines now from an availability on your data perspective. What are we seeing from an ROI perspective on data lakes, especially in the world of cloud? We now have the ability to, I like the, kind of the middle example. Obviously, we have the ability to help ensure that our customers don't have out of stock issues. Is that something that you talk about from a data lake and a technical perspective? Of course not. But, it is the use case, a great use case of being able to ensure that across all of that data, bringing in local weather data, bringing in, local Facebook, Twitter, and other thing data where you see, social events that are going on within the world. How do I pull that in with weather data? How do I pull that in with inventory data to know we're going to have a run on ice cream on Saturday this coming weekend in Austin? Those are the kind of things that we're seeing, being done with Google Cloud and these data lake concepts. From a use case, and I think this is one slide that really kind of shows everything. And really, this also speaks to how our customers coming to us. They're coming to us initially probably for a lift and shift, from a lift and shift perspective. And what they want to do is simply lift all that on-prem data, get it up into the cloud, have the same capabilities that I have today, Eventually, where they want to really get to is I want to be able to optimize. So if you look at, Vodafone being able to consolidate multiple data lakes into one single global cloud is nothing better for it than that. So you have the ability to lift and shift, then consolidate, and then over time modernize to bring new sets of data. Being able to do this to then obviously be able to use artificial intelligence to bring in and analyze unstructured data on top of that. Notice here we haven't really talked about any platforms, any products. This is all about how do I drive higher value of the data from data as an asset and not simply from systems. That's one of the I think the strongest parts of cloud, in my opinion, in general, is we get out of the world of having to think about systems, having to think about services, and we get into the world of providing valuable business assets for changing the way that we as organizations go to market, changing the way we as businesses operate, and changing the way we as businesses interact with our customers. Those are the types of things that we're seeing being driven through this staggering of lift and shift to optimize and then finally to modernizing. Slew of customer examples. I don't necessarily know if I was going to speak to any one specifically on these, but I think these are great customer examples of customers that have migrated and are now working with Google Cloud in a significant way, in the data and analytics space. I spoke about this a little bit more detail about how do customers migrate to us. We see three major paradigms, and most of them start with, I'm going to simply go from what I have today into the cloud. And that would be a traditional lift and shift. It's a fast migration. It's into a fully managed solution known as Cloud Data Proc. So Cloud Data Proc is Google's managed Hadoop infrastructure. We have the ability to also have that as Spark. That is simply lifting your existing workloads, migrating them up. The next layer of that would actually be then to kind of optimize. And I now have the ability to take advantage of not only just Cloud Data Proc, I have the ability to then also begin migrating that into a cloud storage. So it's not just Spark and not just Hadoop workloads. I have the ability to do native, traditional SQL. And that's where I'm going to see in my modernize. As I begin to go down the modernize path, you've got this combination of being able to leverage Cloud Data Proc for large-scale Spark or Hadoop workloads, migrating the resultant sets of those data into cloud storage, then being able to use BigQuery and Cloud AI platform and other platforms like that for being able to actually do modern data analysis and modern data analytics. Using BigQuery, I can use Looker. I can do all of that as I've gone down this path from a lift and shift all the way over to a modernize. Across the entirety of this, and I think we kind of highlighted over on the modernize side that we have actually migrated from fully managed on-prem to serverless computing. I as a customer don't have to worry about how many nodes do I have? How many of these do I have? It's serverless. I just run my query. It consumes as much as it needs. And as soon as that query is done, all of those resources are released. And I'm no longer paying for those services. I have my result set and I'm done. I think I saw a question pop up. Possible to convert Uzi jobs to GCP Airflow? If you can share some details. I'm not going to be the person to answer that, but I think we probably have some folks on who can address that. And if not, we can definitely get that question addressed at a later time as well. All right, sorry, I'm going to keep going. So I'm nearing the transition point. So everyone is like, okay, this sounds great. I've learned a very little bit from today's session in 30 minutes from Scott talking. But in reality, how would we go about actually doing this? So, we have customers that may be interested in moving from Cloudera, MapR, Hortonworks, or maybe even a self-managed. I know that there are still self-managed Hadoop clusters out there in the world. If I'm interested in how would I actually go migrate that, from one of those into Google Cloud, we have a very well-defined process. This is actually where Kelly is going to take us onto the next phase. How would we go about making this process work? How would we go about going from a first meeting, I'm interested, and I'm ready to prepare and discover and go, all the way to how do I validate my data is actually, correctly migrated over. One of the first questions is always, well, this is great. How do I actually get my data over there? Especially because most of the time we are talking about big data. It's not exactly a thumb drive. Google has a number of utilities for being able to get large volumes of data. Goes all the way from batch, and I can use these utilities, all the way down to a transfer appliance. So those are things we can talk through about how we do it. But the bottom one, the Google transfer appliance, that is actually a physical asset that we can send to a customer for you to put into your secured environment, offload all of your data. Those come in multiple sizes. We can offload all that data. You send it back to Google, and then I'm just going to say, magically appears in your project, in your specific instance, for that data. Okay, so I've gotten everybody enthralled. Everybody's ready to move over. Everyone has questions. How do I actually go do this? How do I make this happen? I'm going to introduce Kelly Kaleffel, and then I'm going to go ahead and go on mute myself. And Kelly, roll is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott. I'm Kelly Kaleffel with Hashmap, and really appreciate, first of all, everybody joining this afternoon. I look after, from a role perspective here at Hashmap, business development for the company. And since we are not Google, everybody knows who Google is, I will take you through just a little bit on who Hashmap is, for those not familiar. I personally have been with the company about 3.5 years, and I am not going to state my overall years in the industry because it's even more than Scott at this point. So some quick highlights on Hashmap. So who are we? We're a consulting services company. We're also a GCP partner. The key thing with our clients is that we really want to help focus on that end-to-end journey for data and cloud. And it's about outcomes. Scott talked about ROI. He talked about really being able to measure things as you're doing this. Without that business value, without that ROI, without that outcome, I would say, wait, don't do it. Get that first. Drive towards something. And usually we really try to help our clients think through 4 key dimensions for any data cloud project. How can I do it simpler? How can I do it faster? Not just faster in terms of performance, but faster in terms of time to value. It's been a big challenge in the traditional big data space over the years. How can I sustain this where it's not a bunch of baling wire and duct tape that's holding this stuff together? And then lastly, self-service as much as possible, where I don't have to have these long drawn out IT projects rolling on and on and on to try to get something done. So we've done work across a lot of industries. We're not specific to any one industry. A lot of projects over the last few years, started in 2012. And again, focus in that data and cloud solution consulting space. We've got some interesting solution accelerators as well that we work with clients on to help them even move faster. And then I would say that the cloud automation space is really a high demand item right now with our clients. Next slide, Scott. So when you look at the journey from assessing, strategy, discovering, designing, architecting, and then ultimately executing from a development standpoint and delivering a data product or outcome, we assist in all aspects of that overall journey. And I'd say that when you look at the topic for today and what companies that we work with are challenged with on their Hadoop or traditional big data platforms, and like Scott, I came from 3.5 years at Hortonworks, so 10 years at Oracle, a long time in the data space, a lot of time in the unstructured space as well. I'd say we're hearing some common themes. Number one, it's just taken too long to acquire data, collect data, transform data, and then ultimately make it consumable for my end users, the people that are really trying to get value out of this. So that's number one. It's taking too long. It's really, really hard to keep this stuff up and running. I think Scott alluded to it. When you can go to a service-based model in GCP and not have to deal with the infrastructure effort that you're constantly having to deal with on-prem to keep this up and running, and everybody that's running Hadoop Big Data on-prem knows how difficult this is. That's nice to get out of that mode, but that's something else we hear. It's really hard to keep this up and running. Thirdly, and maybe most importantly, I'm just not getting the value that I want to have out of this investment. I can't get to that value stage. And then lastly, man, this is just way too hard. Can you make this easier? Can you make this simpler for me? So I think all of these questions that we hear on a consistent basis can be readily addressed with the variety of services that GCP provides. And I would say that as you look at going through this journey from discover all the way to deliver, some, I don't know if I want to call them best practices, but things to think about and really consider when you're moving to the cloud in GCP. Number one, and Scott talked about that, lift and shift, optimize, modernize. Where can you modernize and shift even maybe from an ETL, a classic ETL mindset, to more of an ELT mindset? Because you've got really incredible compute in GCP that can be spun up and down. And oh, by the way, you only pay by the drink. Scott talked about that ephemeral nature. I just buy the drink. Let me pay for what I use. I love that model. That's native in GCP. So where can you modernize? Number two, and it's not always possible. Mileage varies. You may have to get a lift and shift done based on something that is driving from a business perspective, but look for areas to modernize, even over time. Number two, get to know, for those of you that maybe have not made a big shift into the cloud, but even those that have, get to know GCP, get to know the cloud services that are available, get to know the platform. And if you're looking to leverage really any services in GCP, know that number one, storage is really cheap. I think the numbers right now, somewhere around $20 a month for a terabyte of storage. Why wouldn't I just store everything out there? It's kind of crazy not to. I've got separation of storage and compute. I can put my data out there. I can use it when I need it. Number two, GCP services, cloud native, developed in the cloud for the cloud. So you don't have this infrastructure baggage. It's an incredible concept that gets you out of the infrastructure game. Let those smart Google guys handle all that. You deal with outcomes. And then I would say that the third thing is, minimal overhead, and that service is always ready to go. So you've got, get to know that cloud platform, get to know GCP, get to know those services, understand the data environments that you're going to be working with. The last piece of advice, I guess, from maybe a best practices standpoint is don't have a mindset. I know I've had it sometimes. I've got to find that one tool that does it all. Especially this happens I would say in the data integration space. How do I get data from my on-prem systems or from Hadoop or from this and that up to the cloud and do what I need to do? I got to find the one tool that handles every pattern, every process, every potential. No, it's not going to happen. You will get absolutely so. The little secret is there is no one tool. Avoid focusing on that perfect tool and really focus on those patterns. Scott talked about this early on. Focus on the patterns that are going to help you facilitate a wide variety of use cases and value, and then have 2 or 3 tools that you can go through. And I'm speaking more from a data integration perspective, getting to GCP. Have 2 or 3 tools that you can use depending on the use case and the outcome that you're trying to drive. There are plenty of services in the GCP suite to assist with this as well. Scott, next slide, please. So I did want to profile a recent customer that we worked with. This was actually a Hadoop, traditional Hadoop big data platform to GCP. And the reason I wanted to profile this one for everyone, I feel like the project that we worked on with this client really encapsulates, in general, how we're helping customers across the board move to GCP. So number one, and I'm not going to read through these, but this was an outcome-focused effort. This client needed to lower costs. Hey, just save me money. I'm paying too much without getting value. But importantly, for their end users, they needed to deliver data more effectively. They needed to get out of that infrastructure business and get into the effective data delivery business. So that was one thing. This very outcome-focused. And I think as we went through the process with this client, we were able to help them step through this thinking of lift and shift, optimize, modernize. And they ended up taking a more of an ELT-based approach along the way that we helped coach and mentor them on, kind of, hand-holding along the way. And they were able to leverage some solutions and tools that really took advantage from a data transformation perspective of the power that GCP brings to the table, that unlimited compute and the scalability up and down on demand. So that was really a cool change for them. It also simplified actually some of the skill sets that were required at the time on the traditional way of doing it in the Hadoop model. They were able to go to more of a SQL only type skill set with BigQuery. I'd also say that this was an end-to-end solution, as you can see, but it wasn't just a wholesale toss out of everything that they had. We were able to adapt some of the tooling to the new GCP cloud model, but I think more importantly, and I talked about this earlier, help automate along the way, help remove some of the manual tasks that were being done to operate and manage and so forth. And again, GCP natively takes care of a lot of that. I think that when you look at this solution overall with this particular client, it leveraged a great deal of GCP services. We, again, going back to what I said earlier, you look at speed, simplicity, sustainability, self-serve. It really clicked on a lot of those boxes and helped this particular client get out of this operations management intensive model with the previous on-prem Hadoop platform that they had. Scott, next slide, please. So we've got a couple of things, last couple of slides here, we've got a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. So how do you really get started? How do you take that journey like that previous client that I talked to you about just did? So this is an easy way to get a discussion going with Google and Hashmap. We offer a half-day complimentary use case and outcome enablement workshop. We specifically do not call this an architecture and design workshop. Now, that's part of it. Certainly we go into architecture and design, but we want to align around a couple of high value use cases that are also fairly low risk. Risk being maybe quick to deliver, the data sets are readily available, those types of things. And we'll help you work through that, talk through that on what are going to be the best things to tackle to get to GCP the quickest, prove value, and really help get things going right out of the gate. So the architecture options we'll also take a look at. We'll look at some organizational impacts, costs associated with all that. Delivered remotely, this is a quick, easy, painless way to kind of get a sense for how GCP is going to help me. Scott, next slide. And then from there, we've got some, again, relatively quick hit accelerator services. So we work with, what we've done is we've basically taken, either a 3 or 5 day approach, and we've said, on a daily basis, these are the areas that customers ask us about the most. Is this a complete implementation of a full-on GCP solution? No, it's not. I'm not trying to promote that, but you will get a very good understanding across these 5 dimensions of what it takes to get there and how you could potentially get there. We've helped clients move from, Hortonworks, Cloudera, MapR, but also a lot of, your traditional appliances as well. Think about your Teradatas, Netezas, Exadatas, HANAs, BWs, all those types of solutions. And of course, on-premise Oracle, SQL Server, warehouses, those kind of things as well. So again, This is not meant to be a full-on deployment or anything like that, but it can help get you a jump start. It hits some of the high points and again, the key aspects that customers continue to ask us about time after time. I did want to note that one of the things we get asked about is, hey, please don't let me get that surprise bill, or even worse, a bill that I've got to go back to management and it's, yeah, we got a big bill and I have no idea what this is for. There's limited value. We want to avoid that. So to us, a very important part of this is, how do we help you with cloud cost monitoring and security so that you're getting value and security out of your new solutions? And I know it's a big deal as you're moving from on-prem to cloud. A lot of those questions that CIOs, CTOs are asking, we can help with that. So I'd say, in closing on this section, try to avoid that, be all end all tool mindset, that unicorn tool mindset. It's tough. It's not out there. You've got a range of services in the GCP suite that you can choose from. We will help you do that. Stay outcome focused and do your best to keep it simple. Look, if you need some additional technology, some additional architectural components, that's great, but keep it simple until you determine that there's an ROI and a return around doing that. Determine that right balance, that correct balance, if you will, of, what's the technical and business fit for my organization. Everybody's a little bit different. You have your own gates, your own controls, your own limitations and advantages, right? So what may work well for one organization may, and be realistic. I mean, to say, hey, I'm going to know every single GCP service tomorrow. I've got all this delivery capability internally, all these skills. It's tough. It takes us a while as a consulting company and systems integration firm to learn the best ways, the optimal ways, the ways that you want to avoid going forward, right, on the next project. So be realistic around those delivery capabilities that you have. Get some help, whether you call us, call Google, call somebody else, get some help if you need it. It will pay off in the long run. And lastly, and I've mentioned this multiple times, think in terms of that 4S model: simple, speedy, sustainable, self-serve. It will help you going forward. So, and I hope that how we've described this today helps you understand a little bit more how to get out of the gates quickly, really quickly, hopefully, with GCP. So, Scott, back over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. So I think from a what we were presenting and kind of walking through perspective, that's the wrap. I hope everyone has a good understanding at a kind of a 101 level, how you might migrate and the services that Google offers, as well as Hashmap, for helping our customers, get out of some of those ROI challenges, get out of some of those hardware refreshes that cost, millions of dollars up front, and going to a serverless, ephemeral, kind of easy to use, easy to manage, cloud-based service. That really was the intention of today's session. I saw there was a couple of questions that came up. It looks like most of those questions have been addressed. It is a good point that we were recording this session. The session will be posted out to YouTube as a public session. So people will be able to hear my voice in eternity, whether we want to or not. If we have any other questions, happy to take even live questions. You can unmute yourself. And as Patrick mentioned, you can hit *6 if you're dialed in. I'll give a pause for anyone to ask any live questions. Otherwise, I think, so we appreciate everyone's time. If you're interested, you can find me. I'm very easy to reach within Google. I can be reached by using Gig'em. I went to A&M. You can reach me at gig'em@google.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Happy to kind of help progress and get you in touch with anyone that you might want to talk through how we can do this. Otherwise, I see it as 1:52. I think we're wrapped, and we'll give everyone a moment to stand up, stretch your legs, and head to the next Google Meet that I'm sure everyone has at the top of the hour. So we really appreciate your time. Kelly, thank you very much. Patrick, thank you as well. I don't know if there's anything else, Patrick, that I'm missing from a wrap-up perspective.
No, you summed it up quite nicely. So thanks all for joining. Keep an eye out on your emails for a link to the YouTube channel where the session will be posted.
Appreciate it all. Thanks everyone for your
everybody.
time.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all. Goodbye.
Take care.